on the whole, I know that we can get frustrated. People talk about, it's to political correctness. I used to be blamed for that. I was blamed for inventing political correctness. It was the same day I killed Benny Hill, apparently. Back in the 80s, I've done all that. But actually, political correctness is normally just good manners. It's normally just understanding other people's point of view. It is,
but there occasionally you come to situations which I then struggle with. One of the scenarios that's been put to me and on several times is a woman who has been brutally raped, perhaps in her childhood, goes to a changing room and she doesn't want to share the changing room with someone who was born a man and has transitioned into being a woman, or was born a man and says she is now a woman when it's their assertion, and then you think, well, whose right should take
Matthew, that's
priority?
A very, very emotive one to bring up, and it's certainly one that I don't think any trans person. I mean, I'm not here to stand for either side. I don't think there should be an either side, but I will say that I don't think any trans person would deny that person, that woman, the right to be upset, to be confronted, and to wonder. But they would also point out, well, look, there's been an awful lot of hatred towards trans people, in various parts of the LGBT community, and they are trying to find safe spaces too. These are complicated debates, and I think we must try. God knows the current political climate isn't helping, but we must try to address each other with civility and try and think about each other's points of view. And don't forget, a lot of what's called PC now, a lot of what we now consider to be just self-evident human rights, was once PC gone mad. Women's votes were PC gone mad at one point. I mean, sure, certainly we don't feel we should be able to beat women in a marriage anymore, but giving them a vote, it's PC gone mad. Freeing the slaves, Mr. Wilberforce, how far are you going to go with this PC-ness? You know what I'm saying? We have to be careful about suddenly becoming intolerant about intolerance.
What drew you to the subject? Because there's so much going on, so much has changed in a comparatively recent time. I was thrilled when I saw you going through it, but I was just interested why you chose
Well,
this
look,
subject.
I mean, the novel Identity Crisis is not about trans issues. It's not about, as I say, incel issues. It explores a country which, whilst like our own, not dissimilar from the one we live in, whilst attempting. We all appear to be so obsessed now with national boundaries. We're talking about, you hear politicians talk about the British people want this, as if the British people are anything other than a mishmash of all sorts. Trump wants to build a wall around America. Scotland wants to leave Britain. We apparently want to leave Europe. Whilst we're talking about geographical boundaries, in the meantime, most people are actually thinking about identity boundaries. People aren't defining their communities anymore by the geography, by who's in the bus queue, who's their neighbour, who's sharing the school gates. They're finding their communities online with people who share a similar sexuality or a different diet, or they're vegans. And so Britain, whilst we all agonise over the national community, Britain actually is breaking up into a kind of virtual archipelago of digital communities, all finding each other online. And that, for me, was a great place to place a novel, because suddenly nobody knows who they are and nobody apparently knows who their friends are. And I've got this series of murders, and it turns out that perhaps they're to do with identity and who's generating the hatred and who is profiting from outrage. I can still see it's Farage, I'm saying it. No, I'm not
he's
allowed
never
to say
off
that.
the bloody telly, is he? Let's be honest.
We've got to be impartial, haven't we?
No,
This
not.
isn't the BBC.
You get 6 hours of rabid right-wing Brexiteer before we come on, and then you have a brief break for me for a little bit of moderate common sense.
I'm loving this show. Sorry, I'm not. Anyway, that's Identity Crisis. I was drawn to the paroxysms of agony that we seem to be going through over national ideals, like the Scottish referendum, like Trump and his wall. In the meantime, people are more and more defining themselves internally, looking for their communities with people who look or feel or sound or have sex like them.
I've had a very old boy tell me over the summer holidays that these are things that are luxuries that come in a wonderful sense of peacetime, when we don't have much else on. If we were in the middle of war or under famine or any number of horrible conditions, that these...
But we are, you see, and Matthew, there I really do, I think that fellow was right, and I do worry, because whilst I have perhaps more sympathy than you, I don't know, but I certainly have a lot of sympathy with people struggling to find a safe place, trying to be themselves, etc. Nonetheless, I do worry that only the left, only progressive people seem to be listening, and meanwhile, the right is in the ascendancy. We have strong men popping up all over the world, often strong men, I say in inverted commas, often using homophobia and racism and anti-refugee rhetoric to find places of leadership. Meanwhile, people of goodwill and are progressive are talking about identity, which is important, but just at the moment, with global warming about to kill us all and with a refugee crisis gathering momentum, and the wars will be over water, and will be over clean air, and will be over warming very, very soon. Yes, I agree. Much as I do sympathise with identity politics, I also think we have to see the broader problems of us as a real community, a human community, who must not let hatred take our eye off the ball, which is saving the planet.
I referenced Stark, your debut novel, which was right on the zeitgeist. A couple more followed on it with environmental issues.
That's
so
right.
Very much at their fore.
It was a trilogy.
It was a trilogy. Where I mean, I have to work with people who just say, it's all nonsense. That the scientists can't agree, that climate has changed, warmed, cooled down forever.
We live in a post-truth world. I mean, Sir Berners-Lee, I mean, honestly, I don't know how he sleeps at night. He was clever enough
I don't think he knows how he sleeps at night.
He invented a way whereby computers can communicate worldwide with each other and share information and disinformation, but he didn't. He was clever enough to do that, but he wasn't clever enough to keep it to his flipping self. And so we now have a world where all knowledge is apparently subjective. There are no real facts. The benefits of the Enlightenment, hundreds of years of humanism, the primacy of evidence, the benefits of science. Our society is based on evidence, law, argument, politics, science. You have to be able to argue your point, but not anymore. We have a president tweeting conspiracy theories from the White House.
How have we got here, Ben?
Sir Berners-Lee. It's, I don't want to sound like
to be fair to him, he does. He hates his creation. He wants to now create a new internet.
Well, I'm not sure that. I'm not sure that's going to help. Obviously, I don't. But I do think scientists and technologists should think about the consequences of what they do. I used to like high streets. I enjoyed high streets. For 10,000 years, the centre of every community was a high street, a market. Ever since we stopped chucking spears at wild boars and started planting crops, humanity has met, exchanged ideas, and exchanged goods at the marketplace. In 15 years, it's gone. Worldwide, there's no markets left. So we don't meet each other. We don't exchange ideas anymore. It is a worrying time. And there's no point blaming the net. It can't be uninvented. I'm not a Luddite. I don't want to smash the digital spinning jenny. But nonetheless, I do think we have to take stock and be aware that the primacy of evidence has been eroded in 15 years, and a president of the US can say, I'll choose my own facts, thank you, and I will choose my own truth, including 99% of scientists can be wrong if I can find one paid for by fossil fuel industries to say they are.
You did galvanise our generation, my generation, I think, at the time of Thatcherism. Where are the voices today galvanising people? I mean, you've got Greta Thunberg, the sort of climate change, but from the world of comedy, it seems... Chris Ramsey, we spoke to him earlier, and he basically said,
doesn't like
doing it.
Well, a lot of it's funny, but I've got to say, Matthew, I used to feel I was a sort of one-person genre, even in the 80s. I mean, people were more politically aware about subject matter. There were very few racist or sexist comedians in the 80s. That all came back in the 90s, when suddenly, we've won that battle, now we can be ironic about it, so we can have our cake and eat it. We can, basically that awful lad postmodernism where you can say, I'm anti-piousness, so I'm going to do a great sexist joke. So there was the 80s was quite a politically motivated time, but in terms of comedy from a point of principle, I don't think it's ever been that common. I mean, what people often ask me, going back on the road, you're touring again, have you been watching other comedians? No, they have nothing to do with me. All power to them, or good luck. But I don't do what any of them do, or at least not many. I take a view from a point of view. I give my own attitudes. I say what I think about stuff. Most comedy tends to be, they're all rubbish, they're all stupid, everything's foolish. I don't feel that at all. I don't think all politicians are the same. I think one of the great cancers of our society is this modern trope, they're all the same, aren't they? No, if all politicians were the same, there'd be no NHS, because some politicians make the NHS, some people privatise the NHS. Some politicians build council houses, some people sell council houses. They're not the same thing. So I take a point of view in my stand-up. You don't have to agree with it. I hope I'll be clever enough to amuse you, even if you think I'm a loud-mouthed, opinionated old what's-it, and what's-it's a good non-rude word to come up with very quickly.
Well done.
Does tend to leave an orangey stain.
So I feel I'm coming back at a good time. I mean, the 80s was a great time for popular art, because I think divisive times are good for art. I don't wish them on anyone, but I mean, the most passionate time for art in the 20th century was Weimar Berlin, a period of constant revolution.
Or revolutionary Russia.
Absolutely, great art. And I think the 80s produced some really good stuff because people were tense and they were angry. I don't think it's not a good thing, but I think it does galvanise youth art. I'm not young anymore, but looking at the way we're all at each other's necks, be it because of identity or because of Brexit, it's a good time, I think, to get back on the road and talk about things.
Well, you're going to be doing Brexit on the tour?
Well, look, I might tease around the subject. Well, look, considering I'm probably going to need a passport to play Scotland in this next tour, I got 6 gigs in Scotland. I hope they'll let me in. And I'm doing Dublin, then I'm doing Belfast one night after the other. What sort of border will I be going through? A hard one, a soft one, a slightly squidgy one? Who knows from day to day?
How do we get here? How do we get to the point we're at now?
We got here, Matthew. The word referendum. Banned in, no, let me finish. Not do I respect the result of the referendum? No, not only do I not respect the Leave vote, I wouldn't have respected a Remain vote, because referendums are inherently stupid and inherently undemocratic, because they are basically a snap poll. The reason that democracy developed into representational democracy, the reason we return a representative to consider things in a proper light, is because obviously we have to pay our taxes, we have to work. We don't want to be asked about every law. We elect our representative, and it is their job to discuss complicated and difficult issues.
And they don't come much more complicated than membership of the European Union.
We voted to leave, but fair enough. Or we voted to stay. Right now, it's up to Parliament to say, how will that leave be managed? How will we manage it? Yeah. And that is the job of democratic representative politics. And you know, the German constitution bans referendums because they had experience of manipulating.
They managed to take people into war. I think in 4 referenda they
yes,
managed
exactly.
to.
Referendums, they might appear democratic, but it's like, you know, if you shout out, should we all bring back, you know, if you show someone an awful murder and then say, who's for capital punishment? You'd say, we all are. We'd feel terribly moved and emotive, and I don't care, hang the person that did that. But then if you show someone a story of someone hanged unfairly or because
Timothy
of a bad
Evans
law, referendums are not democratic. They can be an opinion poll, and what Britain did with our referendum was we told Parliament we want to leave. Now it's up to Parliament, no matter how long it takes, to decide how to leave. But you can't go, we've been told to leave, we're leaving, you know.
Our Prime Minister won't tell us how many children he has referred to black people as pickaninnies, has referred to women in burqas as resembling letterboxes and bank robbers.
Because obviously they're tubular and red and they have a flat top. They look exactly like letterboxes. It didn't even work as a joke.
I mean, you and I probably had a very low opinion of Mrs. Thatcher at the time, or certainly some of the policies she had, but nothing can compare to the language and the approach of our current Prime Minister.
May I say, I always had a lot of respect for Mrs. Thatcher. I did not approve of her policies. In fact, I angrily, furiously didn't approve of her shattering of the community post-war consensus. But as a conviction politician,
you didn't doubt her.
A woman of principle who said what she would do and pursued it without quarter. What's more, she joined the most sexist organisation in the world, the Tory Party, in the 1950s, and led it. Yeah. An impressive politician. This current charlatan, this man who's... to say that Boris Johnson lacks a moral compass is like saying that the Flat Earth Society lacks an actual compass. This man's venal self-interest, his pathological pursuit of his own agenda, which is entirely Boris Johnson, beggars belief. The idea that we have leading us a man who is interested in literally only himself. There's only one person in the country who thought that referendum was about Boris Johnson, and it was Boris Johnson. And he sat down and he thought, what's my best shot here? Actually, I'm kind of European. Most of the stuff I've written, apart from my stupid jokes about bent bananas, sort of pro-European, very pro-immigration while I was mayor of London, the most multiracial city in the world. But what's my best shot at Parliament, at the PM? The lunatic wing of the Tory party. And he did not expect to win this referendum. He thought he'd get close.
Why has he won it, though, Ben?
The referendum or the leadership?
The referendum.
Well, the referendum, of course. Look, it was conducted on, in my opinion, on mendacity, because that's why referendums are bad. Who's giving us the information? Well, apparently some of it was coming from Putin. Look, you can say what you like about it. We got the result was, and it was a surprise. But I do think that if it can be proved that there were lies and there was interference, then I do think that casts doubt on the result. But the truth of the matter is, there are very good reasons to leave Europe. Do you know what? I think the best thing Corbyn's ever said, and I think a lot of he's been very disappointing recently, but the best thing he ever said when asked about was, I'm about 60-40. Because actually, it's a confusing issue. Are you in or are you out? Are you Remain or are you leave? Well, actually, I'm Remain, but I'm not completely convinced, because there are very good reasons for leaving. There are good socialist reasons for leaving the EU. Free movement of labour means you can't organise at the factory gates. It's the end of trade unionism, and they can just bring in other workers. Then nobody can defend their standards.
Well said.
There are good reasons for leaving the EU. There are good reasons for staying. And I thought Corbyn was, for once, the only grown-up in the room where he said, it's complicated.
How do we bring... I mean, you've got our Prime Minister's brother has essentially, thrown down a gauntlet of sorts towards him, saying he's creating a by-election, or will be creating a vacated post anyway.
Well, by-election, definitely.
How do we pull... one of the questions I ask all our MPs when they come to the show is how much longer this is going to go on, the arguments, because it strikes me whether we leave or remain, we'll still be talking about it in 10 years' time, or 15 years' time.
Well, I think most important, I wish more MPs would say, do you know what? No matter how long it goes on, we have to discuss it. Parliament is sovereign. The people are Parliament. This appallingly scary idea of trying to divorce the people, whatever that is, read my novel, Identity Crisis, from Parliament is deeply scary, because actually Parliament is the people. We elect them, and we get another chance next election, maximum 5 years, to elect them again. Representative democracy works that way. They are us.
That's
why they're confused. We're all confused.
We're all confused. But right now, Jeremy Corbyn, admittedly, it was when Theresa May was in number 10, but it was we won an election. Boris gets in, you always get a bounce with a new leader. Understandably, the opposition now oppose the government.
No, they oppose what is a shotgun election. I mean, I've got a lot of problems with Corbyn's dithering over the last couple of years, particularly over not dealing properly with issues within the Labour Party. Nonetheless, this is clearly a straight piece of mendacity to say, I want to call an election before the Brexit so we can, as if that's a referendum in itself. If that happens, we will leave by default. No, I think Corbyn is right at this stage, with Britain teetering on the edge of chaos, to say, no, we'll have a proper election in proper time. Let us halt this process briefly, because it is a job of Parliament. This idea of crashing out with no deal, as if suddenly it's become an attractive option. They've got us to the point where we're so who cares if a few factories close? Who cares if there are a few starving kids? Let's just no. That's silly. We can put up with this for a little longer. Yes, let's have an election, but let's not do it under a shotgun created by literally self-evidently the man of least principle in the House of Parliament.
Ben Elton, when are you going on tour?
I shall be on tour across the country, playing 80 dates, yes indeed, ladies and gentlemen. And by the end of it, I'll have brought the nation together with the healing power of laughter.
When are you starting?
I'm starting mid-September in about a week and a half. I need to get on board of that.
I need a bit of healing power of laughter. The book Identity Crisis is out now, and from the bottom of my stony cold heart, I love you, man. Thank you very much for giving up your time.